Greetings, everyone. Welcome to What Dreams Are Made Of. Our topic for this episode is Possession and Paranoia in Get Out, a 2017 film written and directed by Jordan Peele. We'll explore how Get Out vividly illustrates the dynamics of 21st century racism through a staple of the horror genre, the phenomenon of possession, and the fear and paranoia it cultivates. What is possession? Possession occurs when an occupying consciousness takes control of an individual's body and mind. The appeal of possession in horror films is that it allows us to confront our deep seated fear of the most extreme version of loss of autonomy. Possession threatens our personal control at the most intimate level. Another consciousness occupies our mind, directing our movements, suppressing our ability to communicate, and potentially damaging or erasing the core of our identity, our thoughts and memories. Fear is an emotion induced by a perceived danger or threat. Good horror films generate fear in their characters and their viewers. Fear can be a response to stimuli occurring in the present or in anticipation or expectation of future risk. Psychologists are not certain which perceived dangers or threats may be primal triggers of fear, inherited through the process of evolution, and which ones may be environmental or learned. In Fear of the Unknown, One Fear to Rule Them All, a review article in the Journal of Anxiety Disorders, R. Nicholas Carlton theorizes that the fundamental human fear underlying all others is our fear of the unknown. In a Psychology Today article, Carl Albrecht argues that there are 5 fears shared by all humans, out of which all our other fears are manufactured. His pyramid is a useful framework for analyzing horror films, which employ a variety of subjects and strategies to activate these seemingly fundamental fears. In this diagram, they are in order from least to most intense, moving from humiliation to separation, loss of autonomy, and finally, the terrifying prospects of mutilation or extinction. Possession triggers our fear of loss of autonomy, which sits in the middle of the pyramid, but I would argue that it is a particularly intense trigger. Imprisonment or captivity are frightening because they limit our physical freedom. Mind control strategies such as hypnosis, deprivation, or verbal abuse can direct and limit our behaviors. Yet, even in desperate instances of loss of control, where physical and mental abuse abound, such as concentration camps, individuals still retain dominion over their brains and their bodies, leaving some space for inspiration and hope. One of the most poignant examples of such a story is Austrian psychologist Dr. Viktor Frankl, who survived unspeakable conditions at Nazi concentration camps in World War II. He later wrote of his experiences in Man's Search for Meaning. He said, quote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." End quote. Those inner choices, he believed, gave him a powerful psychological weapon against his captors. In cases of possession, however, those choices may not exist, as the victim is violated and restricted at the most intimate level, inside the boundaries of the self. In the United States, where we value individualism very highly, possession may be a more potent threat than in societies that view themselves as collectivist or communal. Although Americans may reflexively view the notion of a hive mind or shared consciousness negatively, as it undermines individuality, the reality is that our thought processes are growing more connected every day through the constant knowledge sharing enabled by digital communication technology. At this point, you could argue that our minds and memories have expanded to include the instantly searchable and always accessible network of messages and data contained by the internet and telecommunication devices. It may be that as the use of such technologies accelerates, our anxiety about their impact on our individual selfhood will grow, and we'll see an increase in horror films that tackle the subject of possession. Most horror films that depict possession offer a version that depends upon supernatural forces, such as demons or evil spirits. The most famous example of a horror film featuring demonic possession, one that laid the foundation for the manner in which it has been presented cinematically for nearly half a century, is The Exorcist, 1973, directed by William Friedkin, which focuses on the suffering of Regan, a 12-year-old girl invaded by a demon who viciously abuses her body and mind. A reassuring conceit in even the most transgressive possession films is that the consciousness of the victim is still present somewhere inside them, fully intact, ready to be freed if the proper strategies can be found. In The Exorcist, when Regan is finally released from her demonic captivity through the desperate efforts of two Catholic priests, she seems returned to relative normalcy, with no memory of what happened to her. Get Out offers a startling twist on previous depictions of possession. A black man invited to his white girlfriend's parents' home for the weekend discovers a horrifying reason for their awkwardly accommodating behavior. Through hypnosis and a partial brain transplant, they intend to confiscate his body for occupation by a wealthy white man. It is a rare example of a film that employs a scientific foundation to explain the process by which one individual can supplant another in a human body. The plausible pseudoscientific explanation presented toward the end of the film amplifies its paranoid mood. This possession scheme almost feels like something that could happen. Many critics, and Peele himself, have compared the paranoid horror of Get Out to films like The Shining and Rosemary's Baby. In The Shining, 1980, directed by Stanley Kubrick, a man serving as the winter caretaker at a remote hotel is possessed by the spirit of a murderer and slowly grows crueler and more savage toward his wife and child. They dismiss his odd behavior until their lives are directly threatened. In Rosemary's Baby, 1968, directed by Roman Polanski, a woman betrayed by her loving husband must finally face the ghastly truth that she is unwittingly and unwillingly carrying the son of Satan in her womb. Skeeter? Jordan Peele also describes Get Out as the Stepford Wives meets The Help, a phrase that provides critical insight into the strategies that the film employs to unmask racism and cultivate paranoia. In The Help, 2011, a Southern white woman who has recently graduated from college and wants to become a writer hits upon the idea of asking Black women who have taken care of white families their entire lives to relate their experiences, adding another layer of servitude. Now their lives will serve as material for a white woman's literary career. Get Out rejects The Help's naive treatment of servitude and cultural appropriation, instead presenting a horrific and violent satire in which whites literally steal the bodies and lives of Black citizens. But even as whites commit chilling acts of racism, they disavow that racism. For example, at the end of the film, Jim Hudson, the blind art dealer who at first seems to befriend Chris, claims that his planned occupation of Chris's body is not because Chris is Black, but because he has the eye, the aesthetic sensibility of a photographer. Michael Jarvis, author of the review article Anger Translator, Jordan Peele's Get Out, says, quote, "The art dealer is not consigning Chris to a worse-than-death quasi-life because he is Black or as an expression of a whiteness whose soteriology, doctrine of salvation, is the plunder of Black bodies, but because he is sighted and an artist. Stop playing the race card, Chris. Even here, in the moments directly prior to his participation in an occult act of unthinkable evil committed upon an enslaved black body, Hudson compulsively evinces the central fear/refrain of post-racial whiteness. He does not know about those other folks, but he is not a racist. End quote.
This is crazy.
The Stepford Wives, first released in 1975, is about a savvy New York photographer, Joanna Eberhardt, who moves to the suburbs with her husband and discovers that all the wives are being replaced by obedient and sexy robots that replicate their human versions nearly perfectly. The conspiracy she uncovers is so strange and complex that she has extreme difficulty believing that it is true, and of course, no possibility of convincing anyone who might help her. The same dynamic operates in Get Out, as Michael Jarvis discusses. In Enemy Territory Without Knowing It, Chris confronts a conspiracy so vast and complex that he repeatedly concludes that he must be overreacting, even as the strange evidence mounts. For more than half of the running time of the film, he does not yet know that he is in a horror movie. Quote, Chris doubts himself because, as a contemporary American, he inhabits a dominant post-racial social paradigm, the first commandment of which is, it is not about race, end quote. In a post-racial society, there is a general assumption that racism is mostly a past problem. In Get Out, white characters are free to victimize blacks with impunity, and no one, including black police detectives, is able to recognize or believe what is happening because they cannot credit that such extreme racism is possible. Chris's salvation is the fact that his friend Rod, who initially seems eccentric, even ridiculous, because he's so willing to postulate outlandish sex slave conspiracy theories about whites exploiting blacks, is the only one able to see the truth, the violent, nefarious intentions of the Armitage family.
Chris!
Their villainous scheme to possess black bodies goes undetected until the last possible moment, even by their intended victim. The power of Peele's film is that it provides a potent illustration of the invisibility of systemic racism, which can metaphorically, or in this case quite literally, hijack the lives of black citizens. Get Out is also a compelling reminder that paranoia is not simply an irrational feeling of mistrust. It can serve as a healthy defense mechanism against a genuine threat in cinema and in life. That's all for now, folks. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and I hope you'll join us for future episodes of What Dreams Are Made Of.